The desert wind carried Harun's story far beyond his caravan, until whispers of the merchant who traded with shadows reached markets in Bukhara, Samarkand, and even the distant ports of China. Some spoke of him with awe, others with suspicion. Rival traders said he was cursed. Poets painted him as a man who wrestled with unseen forces. Harun himself said little. He continued to travel the Silk Road, though with a quieter heart and a wiser eye. Yet the shadows had not finished with him. Though they no longer came to bargain openly, their presence lingered in the edges of his life, testing whether he truly meant his refusal. One evening, Harun stopped at a caravanserai nestled between jagged cliffs. Merchants gathered around the fire, sharing wine and tales. An old man with a weathered face told of the Valley of Mirrors, a hidden gorge said to show travelers their truest selves. Some who entered returned enlightened, others never returned at all. Harun listened with sharp interest, for the description echoed his own inner struggle. The old man added, "The jinn dwell there, watching through reflections. They do not speak with words, but with the truths men hide from themselves." The thought unsettled Harun, but curiosity, as always, tugged at him stronger than fear. The next morning, Harun ventured to the valley, accompanied reluctantly by Layla, who had not abandoned her role as his cautious guide. The gorge was narrow, its walls glittering with veins of crystal that caught the sunlight. At midday, the canyon lit up like 1,000 polished mirrors, reflecting faces at odd angles. Harun's own image looked back at him from every side, sometimes older, sometimes younger, sometimes distorted with greed or shadow. The effect was dizzying. Layla whispered, "Do not trust what you see. The jinn know how to turn illusions into snares." As Harun pressed deeper, he heard a familiar voice echoing between the walls, the same whispers that had haunted him since childhood. But now they spoke differently, not tempting him with wealth but asking him questions. "What do you seek, Harun? Why do you walk where others fear?" He answered aloud, though Layla heard nothing. "I seek truth. I want to understand the unseen." The reflections shimmered, and one of them stepped forward, detaching itself from the wall. It was Harun, but not entirely. This version's eyes gleamed like coals, and its smile curved with arrogance. "I am what you could be," the reflection said. "If you had accepted our bargain, the world would kneel at your feet." Harun's breath caught. The shadow self displayed visions. Caravans bowing before him, kings offering him crowns, palaces filled with treasures. Yet each vision flickered into darkness, revealing corpses, ruined markets, and loneliness thicker than any gold. "This is the cost," Layla whispered, sensing what he saw. "A throne built on shadows cannot stand." Harun clenched his fists, torn between longing and dread. The reflection extended a hand. "It is not too late. Choose me, and the power is yours." In that moment, Harun understood the deeper truth. The jinn were not only creatures of fire and whispers, but also mirrors of the human heart. They amplified desires, shaped illusions, and tested the strength of will. If he gave in, he would not only lose himself, he would become the very shadow he feared. With steady resolve, he stepped back and said, "I will not trade my soul for sand disguised as gold." The reflection sneered, then shattered into fragments of light, leaving only the glittering canyon walls. The air shifted, lighter now, as though a burden had been lifted. The whispers faded, replaced by silence that felt like approval. Layla touched his arm. "You faced yourself, and that is the hardest battle." Harun nodded, realizing she was right. The true conflict was never with the shadows, but with the temptations they stirred within him. He had sought bargains with spirits, but the greater trade was always within his own heart. When they returned to the caravanserai, Harun was changed. He no longer craved endless riches, though he still valued trade. Instead, he began to barter in stories, collecting legends and lessons from every land. He shared them freely, reminding other merchants that not all treasures glitter, and not all bargains are worth the price. In time, people sought him not for his goods, but for his wisdom. He became known as a teller of truths, a man who once faced the jinn and chose freedom over chains. Yet even as he embraced his new path, Harun knew the shadows would never vanish completely. They lingered in every deal, every temptation, every whisper of greed that stirred in the hearts of men. But now he carried something stronger than fear or desire, the knowledge that no shadow could bind him without his consent. The Silk Road stretched ahead, filled with both danger and wonder. Harun smiled as he led his caravan forward, his steps lighter than ever. The desert wind carried whispers, but this time they no longer haunted him. They were simply reminders that every trade has a price, and that the most precious bargains are those that keep the soul untarnished. The Silk Road was a river of endless wonders, and as Harun's caravan journeyed further east, he discovered that every market had its own legends of the unseen. In Kashgar, merchants swore that mountain spirits guarded the high passes, throwing avalanches upon arrogant travelers. In Samarkand, storytellers whispered of jinn disguised as beggars, testing the generosity of men. Harun, once hungry for gold, now listened with different ears. Each tale, he realized, was less about spirits themselves and more about human nature, warnings against pride, greed, or cruelty, wrapped in the language of the supernatural. Still, not all mysteries could be explained so neatly. One night, Harun and his companions camped near a desolate ruin on the edge of the Taklamakan desert. The moonlight revealed crumbling arches and half-buried statues, their faces eroded, but their eyes strangely intact, staring across centuries. Local guides refused to step inside, muttering that the place was cursed, a dwelling ground for the Ifrits, fiery jinn who thrived in abandonment. Harun, ever restless, decided to explore with only Layla by his side. If the past leaves whispers, he told her, perhaps we can learn from them. Inside the ruins, the air was heavy and still, as though the place had been holding its breath for ages. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, spirals and knots that seemed to twist the torchlight into odd shapes. Layla muttered protective verses under her breath, but Harun pressed forward until they reached what appeared to be a throne room. The stone seat was cracked, yet around it were scattered shards of pottery and coins blackened as if scorched. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed through the chamber, extinguishing their torches. In the darkness, a voice like burning coals rasped, "Why do you disturb our silence, merchant?" Harun's chest tightened. The voice was not like the whispers he had heard before. This one carried weight, authority, a presence that pressed against his very bones. He forced himself to answer, his voice steady. "I seek only knowledge, not to steal or harm." The air rippled with heat, though no flame burned. The voice growled, "Knowledge is never free. What will you offer in trade?" Harun's mind raced. He had nothing material worth risking, and he knew better than to offer loyalty. Then he remembered the lesson of the Valley of Mirrors, that jinn fed on hidden desires. So instead of wealth, he offered words. "I give you truth, that I no longer seek chains of gold or thrones of power. My trade now is wisdom." For a moment, silence hung heavy, then the heat faded. The torches flickered back to life, though neither Harun nor Layla had touched them. On the cracked throne lay a single coin, gleaming as if newly minted, though its design was ancient. Layla urged him not to touch it, but Harun picked it up carefully. Unlike ordinary coins, it was cool, etched with the symbol of a flame within a circle. A token, perhaps, of acceptance or a warning. He slipped it into his pouch, unsure which. When they left the ruins, the desert seemed lighter, as if some unseen weight had been lifted. Yet Harun could not shake the feeling that the coin was no ordinary artifact. Over the next days, whenever he held it, strange things occurred. He found water where none was expected, predicted sandstorms before they struck, and even calmed a panicked camel with a single touch. His companions marveled, calling him blessed. But Layla looked at him with troubled eyes. "Every gift has a price, Harun, remember that." And indeed, a price soon revealed itself. At night, Harun began to dream of a city of fire, its towers glowing like molten glass, its streets filled with beings who watched him silently. In these dreams, the coin burned hot in his hand, and a voice whispered, "You are marked. Our trade is not finished." Harun awoke each time drenched in sweat, torn between awe and dread. The token had given him power, yes, but had it also bound him to a debt he could not yet see? The climax of this chapter came when his caravan reached Dunhuang, a gateway of cultures where pilgrims, traders, and monks all mingled. In a cave temple painted with gods and demons, Harun showed the coin to a scholar. The old man's face paled. "This is no common relic. It is a seal of fire, a promise between realms. You must choose carefully. To use it is to deepen your bond. To discard it is to invite their wrath." Harun's heart sank. He had walked away from the shadows once, but now he carried a reminder that some trades cannot be so easily undone. That night, standing at the edge of the desert, Harun held the coin against the starlight. Was it a gift of protection or a chain disguised as fortune? Layla stood beside him and asked, "Will you carry their mark into your future, or will you cast it back into the sands?" Harun did not yet know. But as the wind whispered around them, he realized his journey with the unseen was far from over. The jinn had not abandoned their merchant. They were walking with him, waiting for his choice. Harun kept the coin close, hidden in a pouch under his robes, though it weighed heavier on his spirit than on his belt. Each time his fingers brushed against the cool metal, he felt a pulse, faint but undeniable, like a heartbeat that was not his own. Layla watched him carefully, never mentioning the coin unless the dreams returned, and they did, more vivid each night. In them the city of fire grew clearer. He saw archways carved from flame, rivers of molten glass, and bridges that led nowhere but into shadows. The beings that inhabited this place did not speak with words. Their eyes glowed like twin lanterns, and their silence demanded reverence. Always the coin burned in his palm, as if reminding him he was bound. The caravan pressed on through the desert, but it was no ordinary journey. Strange occurrences followed them. A sandstorm veered away at the last moment, leaving them untouched while rival traders were nearly buried. A band of raiders who planned an ambush fled in panic when their torches inexplicably extinguished. Harun's companions began to whisper that he carried blessings beyond mortal reach. Yet blessings can be dangerous. With each miracle, the caravan grew more dependent on Harun, and Harun felt the shadows tighten around him. Was he a leader blessed by unseen allies, or a pawn being groomed for their designs? Layla was the only one who dared challenge him. One evening by the fire, she said, "Do you not see, Harun? They are feeding your pride, weaving a net from your gratitude. Every gift is a hook." Harun stared into the flames, the coin hidden in his hand. "And if I throw it away?" he asked. She shook her head. "You cannot simply discard a bargain once struck. You must face it, with courage, not denial." Her words gnawed at him, for he knew she was right. He had thought himself free when he refused the Shadow's final deal, but in truth, he had never stopped trading. The climax came when the caravan approached the fabled city of Chang'an, the eastern jewel of the Silk Road. Just a day's journey from its gates, Harun awoke in the night to find the desert lit not by moonlight, but by fire, an entire horizon aflame, though no heat reached his skin. He stepped out of his tent and saw them, figures of fire and smoke walking silently across the dunes, their shapes shifting between human and monstrous. At their center stood a towering presence whose eyes burned like molten suns. From within Harun's pouch, the coin throbbed violently, glowing through the fabric. The figure spoke without speaking, its voice inside his skull. "Merchant, you carry our seal, you have tasted our power. Now you must fulfill the bargain." Harun's chest tightened. He remembered the ruins, the Valley of Mirrors, the endless whispers. "What bargain?" he demanded. The presence's flames flickered. "You sought knowledge, and we gave it. You sought protection, and we granted it. Every step of your journey has been bought by our hand. The price is loyalty. The debt is obedience." Layla rushed to his side, her voice fierce against the howling wind. "Do not listen. They cannot bind what you do not surrender." But Harun faltered. The caravan depended on him, on the very power these beings had provided. Without it, Would they have survived the deserts, the raiders, the storms? Doubt wrapped around him like chains. The jinn pressed harder. "Join us and we will make you greater than kings. Refuse and you will return to dust, forgotten by history." Harun closed his eyes, memories flooding. Of the first bargain in the ruins, of the silks he had traded for whispers, of the laughter in the wind. He saw his reflection in the Valley of Mirrors, hungry for power. And he saw Layla's unwavering gaze, a reminder that freedom was worth more than crowns. When he opened his eyes, his hand was steady. He drew the coin from his pouch and raised it high. "This is your seal," he said, "but I am not your servant. I will not pay with my soul." With a fierce cry, he hurled the coin into the firelit sand. The coin struck the ground, and the figures shrieked, their voices like tearing metal. The horizon fire sputtered and dimmed, collapsing into sparks that scattered like stars. The towering presence roared, its form unraveling into smoke that dissolved into the night sky. The coin melted into the sand, leaving only a dark, glassy scar. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Harun's ragged breath. When dawn came, the desert was calm again, as if nothing had happened. The caravan stirred, unaware of the battle fought beyond their senses. Only Layla knew the truth. She touched Harun's shoulder and whispered, "You chose freedom. That is the trade that matters." Harun nodded, though his face was pale. He had broken the seal, but he knew the unseen would never truly vanish. The jinn would always whisper, testing men who walked too close to shadow. Yet he also knew something greater, that he was no longer bound. His choices were his own. As the caravan entered Chang'an, its gates opening to the bustle of traders and travelers, Harun carried with him not the weight of a coin, but the weight of a lesson. To trade with shadows is to risk losing oneself, but to walk away is to find a treasure greater than gold, the freedom to choose one's destiny. And though the Silk Road stretched endlessly ahead, Harun now knew that not every bargain needed to be struck. Some whispers are best left unanswered. Chang'an was unlike any city Harun had ever seen. Towering gates carved with dragons, streets that glowed with lanterns, and markets so vast they seemed endless. This was the beating heart of the Silk Road, where east and west collided in a symphony of colors, scents, and voices. Caravans from Persia, Arabia, India, and even distant lands beyond the seas poured into the city, their treasures glittering under the sun. Harun's companions gaped in wonder, but he walked with quieter steps, his mind heavy with what he had endured. Though he had cast away the coin and severed the seal, he knew the unseen did not simply vanish. The jinn had retreated, not surrendered. At night, as the caravan rested in the city's sprawling inns, Harun wandered alone through narrow alleys lined with shrines and shadowed corners. It was here, away from the clamoring markets, that he found monks who spoke not of jinn, but of spirits of balance, guardians and tempters who mirrored the choices of men. One monk, his eyes serene as still water, listened as Harun described his encounters. "What you call jinn, we call echoes," the monk said. "They magnify what already exists within you. Desire, fear, greed, wisdom. These are the threads. The echoes only weave them louder." Harun left the temple with a strange peace. Perhaps he was not cursed or chosen, but simply tested like every soul that walks the earth. Yet fate is rarely so gentle. During the height of the New Year festival, when the streets were alive with dancers and firecrackers, Harun once again felt the familiar pull. Among the crowd, he noticed a figure cloaked in black, its movements unnatural, as if gliding rather than walking. No one else seemed to see it. The figure paused, and though its face was hidden, Harun felt its gaze pierce him. A whisper curled through the noise of drums and fireworks. "The trade is not finished, merchant." His chest tightened. Had he truly escaped, or had casting away the coin only invited another trial? That night, Harun confided in Layla. She frowned, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You cannot run from them, Harun, but you can decide how you respond. They thrive on fear and desire. If you give them neither, they lose their grip." Easier said than done, he thought. Yet her words planted a seed in his mind. Perhaps resistance was not about fighting with fire, but about refusing to feed the flame at all. The climax came days later, in a silk hall where merchants from across the world gathered to trade. As Harun examined bolts of shimmering fabric, the shadows gathered at the edges of the room. No one else seemed to notice. The air thickened, the lamps flickered, and the black-cloaked figure emerged again. Its voice filled his skull. "You cast away our seal, yet you still carry our mark. Choose, Harun. Serve us and rule the roads, or defy us and be broken." This time, Harun did not tremble. He looked directly at the figure and said, "You mistake me. I am not bound to you, I am bound only to my choices." The figure hissed, shadows coiling like serpents. "We will haunt you. We will wait." Harun's lips curved into a steady smile. "Then wait forever." The shadows writhed, straining to terrify him, but his calm was their undoing. Slowly, they thinned, unraveling like smoke before the wind. The lamps brightened, laughter and bargaining filled the hall again, and Harun realized the encounter had passed unnoticed by all but him. Layla, watching from the doorway, gave a nod of quiet pride. The true victory had not been in banishing the jinn, but in denying them power over his heart. From that day on, Harun's legend grew, not as the merchant who traded with shadows, but as the man who walked away from them. He became a storyteller as much as a trader, weaving his experiences into tales that carried both wonder and warning. In every market along the Silk Road, he spoke of unseen bargains, of illusions that promised wealth but demanded the soul, and of the courage it took to say no. Listeners leaned close, their eyes wide, learning that the greatest fortune was freedom, and the greatest strength was restraint. Years later, when Harun grew older and his hair silvered, travelers still sought him out. Some asked if the jinn were real. He would smile and answer, "The question is not whether they exist, but whether you allow them to rule you." Others begged for secrets of power. He would laugh gently and say, "The only secret worth keeping is this: no treasure is worth more than your own will." And when children pressed him for a story, he would sit by the fire and begin, "Once I was a merchant who traded with shadows." The desert, the ruins, the whispers, they never left him. But they no longer ruled him. For Harun had learned the most vital lesson of all: the unseen may tempt, but only those who choose to surrender are truly bound. In the silent desert night, under the vast expanse of stars, a caravan of merchants rested by a dwindling fire. Camels groaned, tired from carrying silks and spices across the endless dunes. Yet among them was one merchant unlike the rest. His name was Harun, a man whose eyes gleamed not with greed but with restless curiosity. While others dreamed of coin and comfort, Harun longed for stories, secrets, and the kind of bargains that could not be weighed on a scale. On this journey along the Silk Road, he would discover that not all trades are made with men. Some are struck with shadows. Harun's path had always been strange. Since childhood, he had heard voices in the wind, whispers that seemed to follow him at night. His mother dismissed them as imagination, but elders warned that such whispers belonged to beings older than humankind. Still, Harun grew fearless, for he had never been harmed. By the time he became a merchant, he had learned to walk the edges of risk, daring to travel where others feared. The Silk Road was more than trade routes. It was a river of cultures, legends, and mysteries. From the bazaars of Samarkand to the deserts of Persia, merchants spoke of spirits that roamed these paths, jinn who could enrich or ruin a man with a single glance. Harun listened, but he did not flinch. Somewhere deep inside, he believed these whispers were calling to him, and he meant to answer. One evening, as his caravan crossed a barren stretch, Harun noticed a peculiar glow near a collapsed ruin. Unlike the stars above, this light pulsed faintly, like breath. Against the advice of his companions, he approached. There, in the hollow of the ruins, shadows twisted unnaturally, forming outlines of figures that seemed neither solid nor smoke. A voice, smooth and echoing, addressed him. Merchant, you carry treasures of silk and spice, but would you dare trade with us? His heart raced, yet curiosity overpowered fear. What do you offer? He asked. The shadows rippled with amusement. Knowledge, power, secrets no man dares hold. That night, Haroun struck a bargain. He placed a bolt of silk upon the stone floor, and in return, the shadows whispered truths into his ears. Truths about hidden wells in the desert, shortcuts known only to the unseen, and the weaknesses of rival traders. When he rejoined his caravan, his companions laughed at his missing silk. But days later, when Haroun led them to water at the edge of death, their laughter turned to awe. Word spread quickly. Haroun, the merchant who never lost his way, who always knew where to find profit, who carried the luck of spirits. But luck is a double-edged blade. With each bargain, the shadows asked for more. At first, they demanded goods, spices, coins, jewels. Then they demanded stranger offerings, the feather of a rare bird, the tear of a grieving widow, the name of a secret never spoken. Haroun complied, telling himself that the rewards outweighed the cost. Yet Layla, a fellow traveler and healer of the caravan, grew wary. Shadows trade in debts, she warned him. Their scales are not balanced like ours. They measure not with weight, but with destiny. Still, Haroun pressed on. His wealth multiplied, his reputation soared, and soon he was invited into the courts of kings. But the whispers never left him. Even in crowded bazaars, he felt their presence, tugging at his thoughts. One night, the shadows appeared to him not in ruins, but in his own tent. "Merchant," they murmured, "you have tasted our gifts, but now you must repay in kind." Haroun, unsettled, asked, "What more could you want?" The shadows answered, "Your word. Promise us loyalty, and we will raise you above all men." For the first time, Haroun hesitated. His whole life had been built on bargains, but this one felt like shackles. Layla's words echoed in his mind. Were these trades lifting him, or binding him slowly, strand by strand, like silk threads forming a snare? He realized then that shadows never give without taking more in return. They were merchants like him, but of a different kind, trading in fear, desire, and the hidden corners of the soul. The conflict within him grew. On one side was the lure of endless power, on the other the danger of losing himself entirely. He began to notice how his hands shook when he touched gold, how his dreams grew darker, filled with laughter that was not his own. At the height of his wealth, Haroun stood at a crossroads, to accept the shadow's final bargain and rule over men, or to walk away and risk losing everything he had gained. The climax came one stormy night on the Silk Road. The shadows rose higher than ever, swirling into shapes with burning eyes. "Choose now," they demanded. "Trade your loyalty, and you will never hunger again." Haroun closed his eyes, remembering the faces of those who trusted him, the companions who followed him, the healer who warned him. For the first time, he saw clearly that his true treasure was not gold, but freedom. With trembling lips, he whispered, "No deal." The shadows hissed, their glow dimming, their voices fading like sand slipping through fingers. The storm broke, and silence returned. Haroun awoke to find his caravan intact, his goods untouched, but his wealth diminished. Fortune had abandoned him, yet he felt strangely lighter, as if chains unseen had fallen away. Layla looked at him knowingly and said, "You have chosen well. Not every trade is worth the price." As the caravan continued along the Silk Road, Haroun carried with him a story greater than all his riches. The tale of the night he traded with shadows, and learned that the greatest wealth lies not in bargains struck with the unseen, but in the courage to walk away.